actions, which he was going to do to save Clint's life. Pressing as hard as possible on his opponent's skull, John tried to kill the zombie, whose blood was visible, which indicated his imminent defeat. Clint lay on the floor trying to rethink what had happened. Michael and the blonde boy stared in bewilderment at the people in front of them, mentally praying that Clint would be okay. Michael looked at Clint's legs visible from the cave, preparing himself for the best outcome. Clint screamed, slightly shocked by what he had just experienced a few seconds earlier. Staring at John, Clint tried to put together a puzzle in his head, not understanding the intentions and motives of the action of the man opposite him. John looked at Clint with a warm smile as he considered his actions. Out of breath, Michael and the fair-haired guy ran into the room to make sure Clint was safe and sound. Michael asked the fair guy to help him so that he would not stand like a stone. But suddenly he was grabbed by the same zombie who tried to kill Clint a few minutes earlier. John stepped on his foot with great force to prevent an attack on Michael. John looked at the zombie with sadness, realizing that quite recently this was a healthy person who, perhaps, had a family, friends, a job. Michael behind him understood the essence of his thoughts, and the fair-haired guy recognized his father in this zombie. The distraught zombie did not understand his actions, so he grunted something inarticulate and tried to get up to continue fighting. But suddenly, he was covered with a bottle of gasoline, which was shoved into his mouth, which is why he, not understanding this action, looked at everyone with emptiness in his eyes. John looked at him one last time, thinking about something of his own. Suddenly, John lit a match, which instantly flared up and illuminated the cave with a dim light. John remembered his long-ago conversation with this zombie, when he was a healthy person. Realizing that he is doing everything as needed, John slowly brings a burning match to the mouth of his old friend, who has a bottle of a highly flammable substance in his mouth. Everyone around is consumed by flames, which mercilessly take these creatures from the world of the living. Among the fire, the man's face is visible. It expresses horror, which will now remain on his face forever. John, Clint, Michael, and the blonde guy look at the fire that is consuming this room and taking these creatures with it. The fair-haired guy, realizing that he has lost the most precious and valuable thing he has, cannot restrain his emotions and begins to cry from the accumulated resentment and pain. Clint silently looks at the fire that he himself wanted to start recently, which would have killed Fred's people. John looks at what he did a few seconds earlier with regret and sorrow. The smoke from the fire continues to reach the sky, as do the souls that it took with it, leaving no chance of survival for the already dead zombies. The heroes continue to look at this. Perhaps each of them is now thinking about the same thing. After mentally saying goodbye to everyone, John turns to face Clint. Clint really wanted to help and morally support John as he passed by, who closed his eyes so as not to show even more emotion. Trying to find words of gratitude and support, Clint looked at John meaningfully. John continued to walk, listening to every word Clint said to him. Seeing no reaction from John, Clint decided to ask him about the most important thing. Clint's gaze expressed the determination of what was said. He longed to understand what exactly John wanted from him. Hearing a question that was addressed specifically to him, John stopped, not believing what he heard, and he was scrolling through possible answers in his head, so he was in no hurry to turn around and answer Clint. In a few measly seconds, Clint mentally fainted 7 times, suffered 3 strokes, cut off his tongue, and managed to say goodbye to his life, not understanding why he blurted out this right now. Without answering his interlocutor, who was eager to know the truth, John looked at him with the most charming and sincere smile that he was capable of. And John, without calculating his strength, shoves Clint in the stomach, as if turning the entire dialogue into nothing more than a joke, thereby relegating this conversation to the future. From such a force of the blow, Clint was twisted in half. A small stream of blood gushed from his mouth, and his eyes expressed a problem on a global scale, which puzzled John a little. Michael and the fair guy were surprised by this trick and were noticeably worried about Clint's condition. John grabbed the surprised Clint's hand to help him. He then slung it over his shoulder so that he could carry it on his own without causing any discomfort to Clint, whom he had nearly injured in the last few seconds. Pleased with this prank, Clint looked at John with a smile and calmness. But suddenly, for everyone, the car in which they could safely leave this territory also caught fire, depriving them of the ability to move. This undoubtedly left everyone confused and surprised, so they simply looked at the car. "We have nothing to leave with. We are doomed. No one will help us. We will die." The fair guy panicked, realizing the absurdity of what had happened. Unexpectedly for everyone, Clint, who was hanging on John's shoulder, managed to slap the little guy in the face, shouting that he had no right to throw around such phrases. Michael tried to defuse the situation, calming Clint and covering the boy with his back, who, not expecting such a turn of events, began to roar again, and John, accordingly, tried to calm the man screaming and screaming, cursing the little one. But out of nowhere, everyone heard a malicious laugh that Leo let out while smiling feignedly. Everyone sharply turned their attention to the new participant in this idyll, certainly turning their attention to Leo. He twirled the keys to the car that belonged to him on his finger, hinting that he had a way out right in his hand. Clint looked at Leo with some contempt and distrust of his person, thinking that this could be another setup. Leo hit himself on the forehead, mentally amazed at this caution, but time waits for no one. If he doesn't hurry up right now, then soon only a name may be left of him. Leo turned to everyone present asking for help, clasping his hands together, showing that he now needed them like nothing else. Having found the car that belonged to Leo, he inserted the key and turned it. Wiping beads of sweat from his face, he realized that the car was not working properly, or he would run out of gas. Looking at the other cars, Leo tried to come up with something new that would help them get out of there. Adjusting the collar of his shirt, which clearly showed his excitement, he announced to everyone that he had run out of gas. The company looked at Leo with a very unreadable look. They were mentally exhausted and very tired. Clint, with not very good intentions, approaches Leo and expresses a look full of anger and fatigue. But suddenly, Clint's eyes fall on something that will help solve his little problem with emotions. Clint hits Leo in the face with all his might, causing him in turn to fly his entire body into a small motorcycle that was standing nearby. Michael supports Clint's actions, while the fair-haired guy is noticeably worried about Leo's condition due to his young age. Clint and Leo shout at each other, thus venting all their hatred and hostility. Clint and Leo are distracted from their conflict by the sound of chains clanking not far from them. While the two were arguing and quarreling, John found a solution to their problem by driving a bus. All those gathered inspect the bus driven by John. Leo is the first to board it. Leo looks inside the bus to make sure it is completely clean and there are no signs of zombies inside. Finding nothing suspicious, Leo, Michael, and the fair guy board the bus in deathly silence. Michael and the blonde guy are trying to remain quiet so as not to continue the conflict that recently occurred with Clint. Leo is noticeably worried about the people who are in the same salon with him. John continues to stand outside and mysteriously looks at the moon, which has recently appeared due to the clouds finally clearing. John looks somewhere into the distance at the horizon and thinks about something of his own. Clint, also standing outside the bus, expresses his gratitude for the quick solution and for saving him, distracting John from his thoughts. John smiles at this and shows that he does this all with good intentions. Clint leaves John with a mysterious smile, entering the bus. Then we are shown other events, and we see that a guy named Will is running as fast as he can, trying to escape from the zombie that is catching up with him. The unconscious creature continues to chase the guy in order to commit lynching on the man. Will runs into a trap that he himself invented and built to fight such unhealthy creatures. A whole crowd of zombies is chasing behind Will, trying to catch up with him and kill him. Will falls to the ground, showing the zombie that he is defenseless and unarmed, so that the zombie woman would quickly jump after him and do what she had been chasing him for all this time. The zombie does exactly what Will originally intended. She did exactly the same as 100 others before her. Will smiles at the genius and resourcefulness of his well-thought-out plan that will help get rid of at least a handful of zombies. The zombie raises his hand to strike to kill the man who lies a few centimeters away from her. At this moment, Will jumps to the side to prevent the zombie from killing him, and meanwhile, the zombie falls to the ground. Will looks with hatred at the zombies surrounding him, not understanding how humanity could have come to this. A crowd of zombies, understanding absolutely nothing, go to their target, but are deeply mistaken, thinking that in the next moment they will kill him. With one wave of his hand, the hero strikes a match and throws it on the ground, which has been doused with gasoline in advance. All zombies in an instant find themselves in flames, which will take their souls. Will looks at the fruit of his labors, at the fire and at the once healthy people who are now being burned alive. The human settlement Will lives with thanks him for his work and his well-thought-out plan. Uncomprehending zombies continue to scream from the fire. All the zombies burned alive in the fire, leaving behind ashes and clothes. Someone's stew of soup is being cooked in the kitchen, which is about to begin to boil, captivating with its delicious aroma. The village head pours soup and pieces of meat into a bowl. Fred, with a sick smile on his face, drags the little girl by the hand who is crying and resisting him with all her might. Fred and the prefect talk to each other, mentioning something about having a nice day. In the dungeon, there are other very frightened people who do not understand the reason for being here. Fred kicks the dungeon's front door to enter. Mothers hold their babies close to them. They look tired and scared. People are very frightened and do not understand the essence of what is happening and the reason for the visit. Fred drags the little girl towards a bowl of stew, who in turn resists. A girl is forcibly stuffed with a human organ, thereby conducting an experiment on whether it is possible to eat it. The girl, overcoming her disgust, tries to chew what was forcibly shoved into her. Fred and the headman carefully monitor the girl's reaction. Continuing to cry and scream loudly, she was still able to swallow this organ. Fred and the others rejoice over the success of the experiment. This stew is poured into bowls to feed other people. All people pounced on food, which is in such short supply during these difficult times. The girl continues to cry and does not fully understand what is happening in the world now. A wonderful night, a beautiful crescent-shaped moon, its pale light and a cool breeze in the middle of the forest, which develops the crowns of the trees, scattering leaves to the ground. John drags an entire bus on his hump as easily as if a small child were playing with cars. The dead man was suddenly alarmed by something, as if his heart was beating faster. He is perplexed by certain sounds that only he can probably hear. Clint notices something strange in John's behavior and tries to ask about it, waiting for an answer from his silent friend. John sharply turned his gaze to the side with his wounded eye. Now he certainly paid attention to something more important. The sky is painted in bloody shades. The light and pleasant atmosphere instantly becomes tense, as if the sky is falling on everyone's head. It's not without reason that the atmosphere has become so tense. Crowds of hungry creatures are following the bus without reason. What a horror it is to meet these monsters in the middle of a dark forest. Their skin is already peeling off. It is gray like ashes after a fire. But one thing definitely distinguishes them from ashes. Unfortunately, they will not be scattered by the wind to the 4 cardinal directions. Clint noticed the threat. He was very scared as such a crowd was approaching them. John demands that Clint and everyone get on the bus without making unnecessary noises. Bus passengers are in a panic. Some have already lost hope for the future and can only wipe the condensation from their glasses. John went to scout the situation for zombies and how they would react to him. The dead were already on their heels, but something haunts them. Their goal. They are looking in a completely different direction. If they were hostile, they attacked our hero at that very second. The creatures passed John by as if they were their own relative. Apparently, they only hunt people, which is both bad and good, since this can be used by pretending to be someone other than a person. John was amazed. They walked around him, continuing on their way, as if he were a spirit to them, unreasonable creatures over whom some virus had taken possession. The danger passed them. It was even some kind of impudence on their part. John was already preparing for battle, and they brazenly bypassed him. Michael can't believe they just left without taking a bite out of each one. Clint calls out to John again, who finally pays attention to him. He decided to mock his dead friend and says that other dead people put themselves above him. One of the subordinates suddenly screams and points in the direction of the zombie. Everyone paid attention to their friend's announcement, and it really was something worthwhile. The dead were heading towards a village inhabited by people, which foreshadowed the worst consequences. The crowd of dead people found a more interesting target than a small bus and decided to wipe even a small village into dust. Leo hopes that they will not be able to decide to follow them, which is why he is shaking as if in the bitter cold. Clint is not happy that the dead are heading to the village, and he needs to make a decision quickly, otherwise it will be too late. John knocks on the bus window and asks them to take their seats and secure themselves well. He grabs the steel chain with his blackened hands and prepares all his strength for an instant jerk. John's last phrase makes even the most fearless tense, as he has planned something that should bring them to the village in a matter of seconds. Everyone buckled up tighter because perhaps for them this is a one-way ticket, a destination. John only forgot to hand over the fare but did not forget to take care of their safety, that everyone was wearing their seat belts, and that no one needed to get out. Their eyes had left their sockets. No seatbelt could save them from such a trip. John runs with a bus behind his back. Such strength is very frightening, and the speed is amazing over and over again. The bus finally stopped floating in the air and descended to the ground. The hero has a serious intention and will destroy any obstacle in front of him, razing it to the ground. The dead turned out to be a bad obstacle for our hero, and each of them sets off on his last flight. A cloud of smoke rises into the sky. Now the apocalypse has begun to somehow manifest itself. The flame-like inferno flared up in the hayloft, releasing clouds of smoky smoke. The dead still reach the village earlier, which is not good. People greedily eat meat that is somewhat similar to the meat of the dead, and this is even worse than a regular zombie attack. The absorption of such food bears its harmful fruits, just as the most powerful drug turns the brain into mush and the body into a shell. The stinking meat of the dead attracts with its smell and forces its victim to enjoy food for the last time, gaining unimaginable strength, and the mind is placed in a wooden box and under the ground. One of the madmen between meals turns his attention to someone standing next to him. He smiles like crazy at his guest, whom he has not seen for a long time. A madman brings part of his dinner to a certain boss, like a servant. The boss does not refuse the local delicacy in the form of dead man's meat, which destroys the very personality in a person. After this, it is better to expect a finale in the form of a rope, soap, and a stool. The mysterious boss turned out to be John's longtime abuser, Tim, and even here he causes mischief by forcing his subordinates to eat zombie meat. The sycophant smelled thoroughly of the roasted meat of the dead, mixing this vile smell with his sweat. Something distracted our badass from his meal, and it might be worth reminding us that zombies are already on our heels. Tim notices that among the flames of the inferno, the dead are rising from the lands, eager to absorb more and more flesh. The boss immediately scolded his subordinate. A bowl of soup was smashed into pieces, and one blow knocked down an adult man. First of all, you need to escape from a crowd of zombies, but this is not about Tim, who needs to beat up his subordinate. He sends him to close the door from the dead, but realizes that this is the wrong choice and death is inevitable. The monster's fangs are sharpened like a razor, and as soon as they get close to the victim, they will not leave a living place on it. The fat man understands the danger of his actions, but does not even try to run away, and then looks at his future death. He calls Tim, hoping for help from him, but one cannot expect much from such people. Tim pointed his crossbow at his ally. He is a born leader, but also a tyrant. Even if he forces himself to be hated, he plays the role of a villain perfectly. No matter how self-confident and cool-blooded he is, anxiety is visible on his face, mostly for his life. The fat man can only agree with his master's decision, distracting the dead from the boss himself, as Tim sacrifices pawns. The fat man points his hand towards the door, and because of fear, his whole body trembles, as if a current had been sent through his veins. He was captured, and he is unlikely to escape from the clutches of death, or even do anything at all. He has no choice but to scream at the top of his voice in the hope of salvation. The dead hand grabbed the fat man, and the rest of the dead will not be left without lunch, so they will probably break off a tasty morsel from the fleshy man. Screams spread throughout the entire room, but this will not help him in any way, after being bitten by a zombie, either being eaten or becoming the walking dead. The fat man no longer has a future because of his greedy, arrogant, and unscrupulous boss. His eyes are full of sadness. His face is filled with fear and pain. Now he realized that his world is plastic, a world of substitutes. His boss is a rare freak who cares only for his life. The others are just finishing their meal when his ally is devoured by vile creatures and is already heading towards them. Screams and screams filled all the empty space inside and outside the room. Tim continues to despise the fat man, although he briefly delayed the zombies at the cost of his life, and those seconds that he delayed for them could save many lives. Incredibly, John's little sister is alive, but how long will it last, since the zombie is already looking at her, and she can only tremble with fear and cry. Tim's cruelty and terrible temper are striking, which forces him to do the dirtiest things. John seems to have heard his little sister, and is rushing towards her at full speed in order to save her from the clutches of the evil dead. He throws the bus around in an attempt to stop it, but it seems like the passengers won't be happy with the ride. The roar that John creates spreads over a long distance. John finally managed to get the attention of his brothers, and maybe now they will start attacking him, and he won't have to chase them. John's shadow, which did not appear against the background of the pale moonlight, is gradually approaching his enemies. The dead also glare at him, waiting for the moment to attack and instantly kill. The silhouette has appeared, and the monsters don't even know which monster they contacted. The monsters are already on the way, and John is just beginning to prepare a deadly attack for them. They surrounded him. What would he do? What would come into the head of a reasonable zombie? He grabs the chain, probably preparing to attack the bus, no matter how harmful it would be for the passengers. John instantly spread his legs in different directions and prepared a stance for an attack. He easily swings the chain, and the bus will move any minute and destroy a couple of dead people's lives. Even the dead faces of the zombies showed fear, which appeared due to the impending danger. John is so powerful that he sent a couple of already dead creatures to the Guardian of the Scales, where they are destined to burn to the ground. He grabs the chain with both hands, which suggests that the creatures and passengers were very unlucky to be nearby. Here it is, a look that destroys all the hopes of enemies, that burns the retina to ashes. A Ferris wheel for Clint and the whole gang, as well as a wheel of fortune for the mind-dead creatures. Those who were lucky survived. John screamed loudly enough to strike fear into even the most fearless of the dead. Blood, stones, and monster carcasses soared into the sky. That's how strong John was after his transformation. A cloud of dust floats above the ground and blocks the view of the remaining enemies. He lets go of the chain, indicating that the ride is over for Clint. One warrior in the field, one for all the walking corpses. The only one who became a walking corpse and remained intelligent, having received incredible strength, vitality, and immunity to zombie bites. The bus was completely destroyed, as if it had been in the most dangerous accident. John asks the survivors not to be afraid of him, since he is the only peaceful zombie on the entire Earth. People continue to shower him with lantern light and no longer trust him, since it is unusual for a zombie to be adequate. The light blinds our hero, but thank God he is prudent and not like Tim, his complete opposite, an angel and a demon, a cat and a dog, fire and water. John asks to stop shining the flashlight at him, as it really annoyed him, and he would have continued to shine it if you hadn't told him. The flashlight fell to the ground and scattered the light around, which is good in the middle of the night. The man's eyes are full of fear, because of which he dropped the flashlight and is probably holding on with heaviness from minute to minute, screaming to run to somewhere far away from here. The dead gaze in John's once-dead body strikes terror even into the rescued people. Everyone fled in different directions, and it really hurts when people judge you with prejudice, when you are reasonable, and they call you a monster, when those whom you saved run away from you. John remained silent, but he definitely didn't like this attitude, even if they can be understood, but it's also impossible to be so biased. Clint and the whole team have endured a real nightmare, and they are not at all happy with such trips. John steps in his red sneakers towards the village. One of the previously familiar club of our hero's offenders, who bullied our hero, is now asking for help as far as the situation changes people. He tries to save himself and asks John not to attack him, so hopeless and weak. John has one goal, because he understands that if his offenders are nearby, then his only remaining relatives and friends are also nearby, and he should hurry, since his sister is already on the knife's edge. He enters a dark room in a village, shrouded in mystery and darkness. John's gigantic shadow fell on his sister, whose tears even created bruises under her eyes. What horror she experienced! It's hard to imagine what wounds on her soul were lodged deep in her heart. He calls her name, tries to approach, but what will be her reaction when she sees her brother, a massive zombie, in his place? John tries to reach out his hand to his little sweet sister. She reacts like a real person. Screams and screams are typical on her part, since she has already seen a lot, and the dead man is also reaching out to her. He was frightened by this reaction, for sure. He could not expect that the last person close to him would reject him. The hand stops abruptly. The tension has increased, and it is unlikely that anyone after this could hold back his tears, which filled his eyes with constant moisture after such an attitude, as if the sun was going out. He is in shock. His face is filled with despair. His body is constrained, even in the body of a dead man. Human emotions, feelings, and affection for his loved one do not leave him. The little sister continues to scream and ask for salvation, calling for her brother, who is standing right in front of her. John is full of uncertainty, but still tries to convince his little sister. The pupils shrank to the smallest size, his fear for losing his little sister when she is right in front of him, when he saved her and he can touch her. His legs give way. He cannot react in any other way to how his own sister and his love reject him, and his devotion is amazing, since even his health is at risk when he is so worried about his loved ones. The body aches and the heart is pierced through. This is the most terrible feeling for a person, because no matter how strong you are, it destroys you from the inside. He is already ready to fall. The strength leaves his legs, and a stone falls on his soul, which proves his humanity. John was knocked to his knees. As before execution, his head was put under the blade by the most cruel executioner, a dear man, because he can heal any wound, but also deal the deepest blow, cutting his head off his shoulders. The atmosphere is overwhelming. The soul leaves even the deadest zombie. She is small, defenseless, and a real crybaby, but her willpower can be envied since she did not lose hope for her brother's life and believed to the end, although she saw his death with her own eyes. John justifies her fear by saying that he is similar to a ghost, which is why she experiences fear. He continues to make excuses for her, but all this is for her sake. The poor girl huddled in a corner so that no creature could touch him, so that her brother could save her. How much horror they experienced, John, who was eaten by his own parents, his little sister, who survived the death of her parents and the indirect death of her brother. He hates himself for his weakness and promises himself that he will never hurt his family again. Her tears stopped. She probably realized who was in front of her, and this should make her very happy. Her gaze cleared. All kinds of shock were written in her eyes. The tears froze and evaporated against the backdrop of shock, like a second wind for her. She saw in this dead man John, her brother, her dear one, her only joy, like a sip of water in the desert. Pale, overgrown, but still reasonable. A brother who will stand up as a wall for his little sister. She finally decides to take the first steps towards her brother, who has been missing for such a long time. The dew on the cheeks begins to evaporate. The atmosphere is painted with new, brightest colors. The little sister touched her brother as if he were a strange animal, as if he had appeared at the most unexpected moment. And John's face changed. His gray world became colored, and his loved one colored it, like that same old song that gives the most vivid old memories that I would like to return to for a few minutes or think about it. Truly childlike joy on her part, the most sincere joy a person can experience. Her shock cannot be measured, since she is already talking about herself in the third person. He, too, tries to hug his dear one with his rotten arms. He hugs her with all his might and promises to never leave her again. Clint puts his hand on John's shoulder and interrupts the long-awaited reunion of brother and sister that might not have happened. He is not trying to distract them from the reunion, but wants to warn them about something very important that should interrupt the celebration of John and his sister. Those who ate the flesh of the dead began their transformation, as evidenced by itching, pain, and a strange cough. One of the allies notices all the most important things over and over again, the most far-sighted in the whole team. He pointed to the man who was crushed by a stone and his leg was definitely not feeling well. He was trembling all over and holding himself up with heaviness. John entrusts custody of his sister to his friend Clint and asks him to look after her so that he can look after that guy. The girl continues to worry about her brother and does not glance in the other direction, so as not to lose sight of him, so that he does not get lost over the horizon. John approaches the man with every step in order to examine him and identify what is happening to him. The man's face has already fallen. He is clearly not feeling well, but John still naively questions him in the hope that he is in good condition. His teeth are sharpening, but the man can only talk about meat. His transformation into a dead man continues, and the danger is the same. Copious discharge emanates from the mouth, as if the reaction of a bear to honey and a dead man to living meat. The most animal instincts awaken in him. John was shocked. A zombie, a creature from his worst nightmares, awakened before his eyes. Such a transformation is very frightening. The virus alone changes everything in a person, from appearance to personality, which disappears under the pressure of the parasitic virus. Clint pointed out that the man was mutated and shouted after John to be careful. John's reaction was lightning fast. He instantly reacted to the dead man's attack and slammed his face into the ground. Such a blow should leave a seal on the ground, and the stone should split. John looked at the dead man with some anger and was ready to grind him into powder. He orders to take cover in front and move further to reconnoiter the situation further down the road. They agree with his order, and they should hurry up, since he is the boss of the entire gang of dead meat-eaters. Clint calls everyone together to find shelter from the zombies as quickly as possible. Walking corpses are already gathering behind the destroyed wall, and the rest need to hurry. Otherwise, John alone will not be able to save everyone, no matter how strong he is. The dead can still speak, but their words seem to be programmed, and they can only endlessly beg for food, as if their stomach is a pit of burning waste. All food burns within a second. John still holds the head of his enemy, but even after such a blow he shows signs of life. Even such a strong blow could not extinguish the torch in his life. John noticed his vitality, which makes each dead person much more dangerous and makes him the highest stage of evolution. The face of a dead man is immersed in the ground, where he should have been waiting for a long time, but the evil virus makes a doll out of him for its reproduction, to obtain energy and protection. As soon as you relax, a mouthful of sharp teeth flies at you, biting through metal and crushing stone into dust. John is not so weak and easily stops his own kind, grabbing his head to carry out the execution. He is terribly annoyed by the behavior of the dead, how they attack without even figuring out who their enemy is and how strong he is, so to speak. They get into trouble. With one movement of his hands, John sends the zombies to the next world, quite ironically, to die twice in their lives, where one of the lives is simply a mindless consumption of meat. John is truly special. He is not a human, but he is not a zombie either. But on the contrary, many factors make him different from everyone else and set him apart in the same way. There are really a lot of dead people already, and they were all once people, but their heads were enslaved by a virus, and it is unclear whether they are in pain. John notices that the situation is heating up and he needs to hurry to everyone. One of all the madmen has not yet turned, but if he ate meat, then he did not have long to live. There are already many rotting spots on his body, and enslaving his mind to the virus is not long and not difficult. He asks our John for help, but where is his boss, whom he trusted so much? Yet the man will lie under everyone in order to survive. John has one goal and he needs to move towards his team. No little thing will stop him. Tim is so terrible that he experimented on his subordinates, forcing them to eat the meat of the dead, which leads to even greater devastation and allows the virus to spread more. It's already hard for a man to ask for help. His mind becomes cloudy, as if from the largest dose of a drug. A parasitic virus enslaves the mind to the end, leaving only a shell. His face depicts fear, pain, and despair. His half-rotten face personifies all his emotions. Before and after, a second decided the future life of a once man, now a walking corpse. Now he is like a mad dog who just wants to bite off a fresh piece of meat. John is greatly annoyed by such a terrible virus that plunges this world into the abyss of despair, a virus that separates a person from his loved ones, and so suddenly, he turned to his enemies, showing them at least some respect. The situation is so hopeless for every eater of the dead meat they enjoyed until the end of their deaths. The dead man rushes at John, but only seconds ago he asked for help, and it was him who John should have helped. He, as the arbiter of justice, wonders whether he deserves it or to die without suffering, which is already mercy. A terrifying grimace of a dead man, as it is rare to see one who can open his mouth so wide for his victims. The dead man's face instantly turned to mush, just from one blow from John. John dealt one strong blow to the dead man, and with such impudence looking at him and finishing him off with each new blow. A strike with the elbow on the arm with such aggression that he would not be able to attack or eat anyone else. John's terrifying scream, which instills horror even in the insane dead, who absolutely do not care about any fear. The terrifying hands of the zombie are already reaching for profit, in anticipation of feeding on human meat. Everyone closes the door from the monsters at once, and hardly anyone will help them from the outside. They can only hide in a shelter and wait for John to arrive. Michael is already losing hope of survival due to the number of monsters. He asks Clint what to do next. Even if there is no hope for the future, only fate decides their future. They can only wait and hope for a prudent decision of fate, hope for fate, although this is the same thing. Someone unknown instantly rushed past Leo and touched him, whether he was striving for someone and striving so hard, not seeing anyone in front of him. Someone grabbed our Clint, and this someone apparently came with bad intentions as he called him a freak. Clint knows this man and their past makes itself felt, since he had to have the hefty courage to come back here and get hit in the head by this man. Clint and the girl were thrown towards the door. The team was shocked by such events. Everyone was trying to help them. It turns out that this man is the father of our Clint, and the woman who is holding him is his mother, and the family is pronounced, since the father is quite angry with his son. The scientist and the whole team are shocked by the sight they saw and stand with their mouths wide open. Clint's mouth began to bleed from such a blow, and everyone else would have wanted to help him. The father points to Clint and orders the mother not to protect her son, since he allegedly wants to exterminate his entire family. Clint cheekily mocks his father, since he rarely thinks about the fact that they are a family, and perhaps the father himself is the root of the problems in the family. The cheeky smile does not leave Clint's face, and he continues to mock his father, since he probably hates him, and the feeling is mutual. He likes the fact that he can mock his own father, who apparently has done a lot of things to achieve such an attitude. Someone from the highest building is looking at everyone, shining something. He looks at John's battle with the dead and perhaps is preparing something for John himself. The surprise was a familiar arrow from a crossbow from a familiar freak. John skillfully sends every dead man flying, as if he had devoted his entire life to exterminating walking corpses. The guesses turned out to be correct, and the previously familiar crossbow belonged to our boss Tim, who could not aim at John because he was too fast. A certain beauty is trying to be insolent to Tima and claims that today is clearly not a good day. Tim immediately sensed the impudence in her words and asked what she said. The beauty turned out to be John's girlfriend, whom he lost and whom he loved so much, but sacrificed himself to protect his cute little sister and beautiful friend. She points out that everything bad came back to Tim like a boomerang, since he taught people to eat zombies, but now they will eat him. He was greatly hurt by this caustic phrase, and she might not feel well after such words, knowing his character and bad temper. No one knows what she expects from her words, but her face full of misunderstanding suggests that she does not know what can await her. Tim, like the most evil villain, mocks the girl's words, not realizing that he is in a really dangerous situation, but his self-confidence overshadows his prudence. He began to laugh even louder, which confirmed his incredible confidence. Tim let go of his crossbow and was apparently preparing to strike the beauty or simply hurt her. He grabs the poor girl by the neck and begins to strangle her, like the most arrogant freak, such cold-bloodedness towards the one he loves. Without even a second's hesitation, he will throw the love of his life into the crowd of zombies in order to survive. She's in pain, but he doesn't stop holding her by the throat, saying that she has no right to contradict him, but she just can't stop, and obviously, she's already received punishment from him more than once. He brazenly grabbed her most tender and inviolable parts of her body, like a real freak who only needs to burn in the flames of inferno, a terrible rapist who ideally plays the role of a villain. The beauty obediently obeyed him and even shed tears, which was painful even to watch, the worst feeling. Tim is so terrible that he took away one of this beauty's legs. This freak cut off her leg so that she would be submissive to him and only him. His insolent gaze pierces and frightens our heroine with his hot breath. Everyone would like to grind him into powder, make a sieve out of him. She finally understands the horror she faces and the danger that awaits her. Grabbing his neck in a death grip, he holds it in the air with one hand, which is amazing, since you need to have a lot of strength to do this. Still, something stopped him, but it is unclear what exactly. Maybe his conscience woke up, which is not there. She begged for death, but he didn't like that, and he threw her on the bed so that she would never talk like that again. She started coughing because of this, and clearly, she didn't deserve such an attitude. No matter how insolent she was, he himself deserved it, since you can't be nice by force. He looks down on the beauty, who is out of breath from each of his blows. Tim breathed a sigh of relief, probably to calm down and calm his anger. He tries to apologize. What a two-faced freak who needs to wear a straitjacket to treat his narcissism and anger. The girl clutches her chest to catch her breath, since every breath of air is important to her, especially with such a tyrant who will sacrifice the most important things in order to survive. He promises that this will never happen again if she is obedient and never insolent to him again, but at the same time he demands good treatment. How quickly his character changed in a matter of seconds so that she would not be angry with him, since he loves her with all his heart. But if she were an ordinary person, she would be food for monsters. Tim brings his hand to the girl's face, explaining that she should not think about a man who died more than 6 months ago, and she is only his. Clever girl instantly bites Tim and bites his finger until it bleeds. Perhaps she was greatly offended by those words on his part. Scarlet blood gushes out of Tim's finger in a stream, and he didn't like such impudence from her. Tim turns his evil gaze on the beauty, whom he will definitely kill after this. She slipped past him and quickly tries to grab the crossbow, probably to protect herself from the tyrant. He understood her intentions and quickly decided to stop the beauty so that nothing would happen to her. Her fingers are already on the trigger, but for some reason they are facing the opposite way, and she doesn't look like a stupid girl to grab the gun the wrong way. She pointed the crossbow at herself because she completely doesn't want to be with him and would rather die than suffer with him. The trigger is already moving and foreshadows the death of the valiant beauty who remained faithful to her beloved even after his death. Tim is furious at such a blatant but reasonable trick. Our heroine is very smart, since she bypassed the cold-blooded tyrant who thinks through his every action and takes this world by the tail. The girl did not have time to fire a shot, and her crossbow flies in the opposite direction. One blow to the beauty's hands and her entire well-thought-out plan will go down the drain. Still, the shot was fired, but the arrow flew out the window to other zombies, including our John, although, according to Tim, he had been dead for 6 months. He is shocked by the determination of the beauty, who is ready to die so as not to be face-to-face with him within 4 walls. He was perplexed by the fact that he loved her to the point of losing his mind. He was ready to deprive her of her legs so that she could be his thing. It turns out that her death is one of the outcomes of the plan, and she wanted the arrow to fly towards all the dead so that they would know where to go to find the boss of the whole gang. He was shocked by what his beloved said, and he understood what she was up to and where it would lead. The arrow was fired towards the window and flew towards the dead, which did not bode well. Now the dead will chase after him, since the plan of the brilliant beauty worked perfectly, and she can only impudently mock him. Tim looked out the window with a face full of fear, as he had many problems that he could not solve. He runs to the window to see the dead people's reaction to being shot at. This coward looked out the window lightly because he was very afraid, but he would find a way out of such situations anyway, due to his cold-bloodedness and lack of any mercy. Something shocked him very much, and this something is very dangerous for him. All the dead are defeated, and among everyone stands John, who put the bodies of all the zombies on the ground and looked exactly at our boss. But what is most frightening is that he caught the arrow on the fly and his same reaction, which made it possible to see this arrow that flew out at a distance of about 50 meters. John's gaze rushed towards Tim, and knowing his speed, Tim would soon have to meet him face to face. He does not believe who caught his arrow, whether it is an ordinary dead man and whether he is very similar to an old acquaintance. John, with pathos, bent the base of the arrow and presses his gaze on each of his enemies. He realized who this dead man was, and he would not care if they met. He runs towards the girl. She naively doesn't understand what could have frightened even Tim himself so much. Tim grabs his beloved by the waist in order to grab her with him and run away. The scoundrel grabbed the beauty and carried her with a quiver of arrows to the exit of the house. His memories began to awaken, since he does not believe that John is still alive, but he was brutally torn to pieces by zombies before his eyes, and it could not have been otherwise. Tim's legs quickly lead him out of the house, so that each time he runs away from John faster and faster. He instantly flew out of the door, where the dead were already waiting for him outside his door. But Tim turned his attention in a completely different direction, and apparently, John was already running at full speed in his direction. Everything turned out to be true, and John is already on his heels, as he literally found himself in the backyard of the house in a matter of seconds. Tim is surrounded, but he does not yet know about the zombies behind him, which is even more dangerous than John, who is not hostile to people. Tim finally understands that in front of him is definitely not a person or even a dead man, since ordinary people and even zombies do not have such power. The freak is completely shocked by the speed and strength of our main character, and also by the fact that he was a previously familiar hero, whom he mocked at the end of each semester even before the apocalypse. The growl of a dead man is heard in the background, and Tim pays attention to it. The zombie is already behind him, and it's unlikely that anyone will have time to save Tim. He is not even afraid that there is a dead man behind him, an old enemy in front of him, and he has nowhere to go. It is unknown what John will do, protect Tim from the dead man, or give the dead man the opportunity to eat him and then kill him too. John effectively and just as instantly destroyed the danger with one movement and spared his enemy. The boss can't even hold his beloved on his shoulders. How can he protect and take care of her? The dead are trying to go into Clint's hideout and feast on every little person in the room. John sends one of the dead into the crowd of his relatives with one of his kicks. Clint's fists are smeared with blood. The battle is even between people. He deals blow after blow to his father, so that he finally understands that he shouldn't constantly interfere with him. A man loses a couple of his teeth for every blow from his son. The scarlet blood that flows like a river from the father's mouth has already stained the whole earth with its color. Mother begs and begs not to continue the senseless family fight, the only one who thinks sensibly in such situations. The whole team is perplexed by what is happening here, since no one expected such a family meeting between Clint and his father and mother. Mother, already on her knees, asks not to fight anymore and to resolve everything peacefully, which is impossible in their family. Clint believes that he is not worthy of life, and he returned home just to kill him, just to get rid of his parent. She is shocked by what her own son said, but still hopes that everything will end much better than she thinks. Clint pulls out a knife and is clearly determined to end everything here and now. Beaten half to death, the father lies on the ground and does not even imagine that a sharp blade is waiting for him on his throat. Clint is determined to win and is ready to plunge a knife into the heart without any regret and send his father to the afterlife. Suddenly, he is stopped by a roar behind him, which our John probably created and arrived right on time. Pieces of wood fly in different directions. Michael tries to cover John's sister and somehow protect her. The finished-off dead flew into the doorway and broke the doors themselves against the backdrop of a cloud of dust. Clint understood who stopped him and nervously remained silent, as he could say too much, thereby leaving the world without even taking revenge on his father. John himself appeared in a cloud of dust, dead and alive at the same time, a dead man with the mind of a man, the most powerful zombie among all. Clint notices that he came right on time and arrived at the most interesting thing. John looked at his ally in disbelief as he became mad with hatred and became reckless. The crowd of the dead is defeated by one zombie man, who is so strong and fast that he was able to defeat all the zombies in a matter of minutes. Tim is on the verge of life and death, and can only sit in clouds of dust and await his fate. The poor beauty has suffered a lot, and only one person is to blame for it all. She tries to open her eyelids, which grow heavier with every new event. The girl languidly tries to pronounce the name of her beloved, whom she lost 6 months ago, who sacrificed himself to save her and his sister, hoping for their happy life, in which he was mistaken. A wonderful sunset against the backdrop of the apocalypse. Where is the sky of a real dystopia, gray from emptiness or red from shed blood? The most terrible dream appeared before the girl's eyes, as she saw memories of how her beloved died, and that beautiful sunset would never seem so beautiful, so wonderful to her again. How she screamed in moral pain when the dead took a bite out of John, when she tried to close her sister's eyes so that she would not see this horror with her children's eyes. While John distracted the zombies, Tim decides to break the glass and run for the hills. The glass broke easily and sharp fragments flew in different directions. Tim grabs the beauty who is holding the girl who wants to return to her brother and breaks out of her hands. She was able to get out of the beauty's hands and cannot understand the danger that lies outside the windows. The girl sees nothing behind her tears and strives for her brother, but he sacrificed himself to save her. The beauty calls on her to return to her and run as fast as she can. One of the zombies has already gotten close to a small, stupid girl who doesn't listen to her elders when it's really worth doing. The zombie is already before her eyes, and she can only stand in a stupor, like a deer in front of a truck. John's beloved escapes from Tim's arms and rushes towards his little sister to save her. The scary monster has already struck terror into the girl, and she can only drool in front of him. Incredibly, he bit the girl, and apparently she didn't have much time left to live, and all because of one stupid thing. Still, the beauty managed to save the child from the clutches of the monster, and she apparently was able to survive, since the girl fulfilled her duty to John. The girl can only cry emotionally, although she put everyone in danger. The girl probably did not have time to escape and was wounded in some part of her body. The dead man bit her on the leg, the same leg that Tim cut off, so that the virus would not spread throughout the girl's body and completely leave her in a desperate situation. She still continues to believe that John is still alive. The stage of denial haunts her. Her tears can be understood, since she experienced the loss of her leg, her loved one, and her family. She was forced to live with her hater, and it was as if all the worst things happened to her. The girl cannot see dead John in front of her, cannot believe that he is dead, that he was eaten by his parents. Tim saw that she had been bitten, and he needed to quickly make some drastic decisions. His gaze lit up with a golden flame, and he meant it seriously, without any mercy. He snatches the axe from his brother's hands and runs to save his beloved so that she survives. The dead man was killed, but the entire leg was saturated with the virus, which in a matter of seconds already spreads throughout the body, enslaving it. Tim can only cut off the leg of his beloved, and there is no other way, calmly and without hesitation, cutting off the diseased limb to give the opportunity to live on. The veins on the leg have already bulged, and a purple spot has covered the floor of the leg, which means that the virus is already spreading throughout the body. Tim makes a strong swing with the axe so as to be sure to chop off the legs and not regret it. The blood is gushing in different directions, and Tim put all his strength into the blow, even if it is his one whom he loves so much. The severed leg lies further from the body. A bloody puddle has covered the entire ground around. What a strong will she is, since anyone would have already fallen into a painful shock and could not even shed tears. And she cries not even because of pain, but because of the loss of her loved one, who has suffered much more than she has. The clever girl reaches out to the cold body of John, who is unlikely to ever answer her. Still, there is not a drop of life in John. He is dead. Everything is over for him. Now our heroine is drawn to John, who is alive, but no longer the same as before. Having become a zombie, he has not lost his mind, which should be complete happiness for both. She calls him, to which he does not react, standing in a cloud of dust. Our beauty asks to look in her direction so that John at least looks at her, so that he protects her and warms her under his wing. He only now notices her, hears her words. This is probably the most anticipated meeting during the entire separation. Suddenly, one of the surviving dead pounces on her, and she will be in trouble if she gets hit. John instantly reacts to the dead man and will take the fastest step in order to save his only moon among the faded stars. Like lightning, John comes right in front of the zombie and stops its attack. She is fascinated by the speed, because she didn't even dare to dream that she could see him, her beloved, again. She managed to react to John's rapid movement, but she was worried that he had been bitten by the dead man who had once bitten her. The walking corpse has grabbed onto our hero's shoulder and is not going to let go. Blood flows from the bite site, and this irritates John over and over again. The heroine did not expect such endurance, such immunity, speed, and strength, something beyond the limits of reason. Someone hits a zombie and stops his life in this world once and for all. The savior turned out to be Clint, who asks not to interfere with the reunion of the lovers. Two lovers' gazes met after a long separation, which changed their lives upside down, which deprived them of the meaning of life, and all their efforts were not useless. She tries to recognize in him her beloved John, whom she could not forget 6 months later. A bright smile lit up on John's face. His world was painted in even brighter colors due to the meeting of the long-awaited person, his loved one. Her most beautiful lilac eyes, like the same lilac that blooms in early summer, in the midst of the summer heat and sun rays. John claims that he heard every word she said, every rustle she made. He sweetly wiped the blood from her cheeks, thereby showing trust in himself and his own as well. He couldn't control himself then, which is why he didn't react to the words as he should. The heroine's eyes were covered with tiny diamonds that flowed down the beauty's tender cheeks, but these were just tears of happiness. The beauty extends her warm, gentle hand to her John's face. The girl still cannot believe that this is her John, that he is standing in front of her and rejoices at her appearance in the same way as she does. She hugged our hero tightly, showing her affection, care, and love. She clearly believed that it was him. Our hero's beloved cries like a child and cannot stop because she dreamed of finally seeing him. Like Beauty and the Beast, they are complete opposites, which is why they harmonize, making them the most unbreakable couple. John doesn't blame her for anything, showing his love for her by forgiving her everything. He pressed her tightly against his massive shoulder and used it to collect all her tears that she had been accumulating inside herself for so long. Tim is already starting to get to his feet, which means he must do something bad for them. He calls John's life hard and stinking, although he does all the most vile things. Tim grabs his wooden crossbow and prepares arrows for the back attack that is in his repertoire. John, Clint, and the beauty stand together and nothing foreshadows trouble. Tim sees that he has a great moment to attack them and settle everything with John to the end. He gathered all his malice and anger into his fist. His gaze is charged with golden energy, and he is ready to kill. The arrow has already been fired from Tim's crossbow, and it is unknown what John will do about such a move. Clint notices the attack from behind and warns everyone about it so that everyone can escape. John spectacularly catches an arrow in flight that was capable of piercing everyone in one shot. John is so strong that he is able to stop an arrow in mid-flight, even despite its flight. Tim is shocked by what he sees and has no choice but to run headlong. John points out that it's been a while since he and Tim have seen each other, and he's missing a couple of life lessons. After the moment when he sent our hero to be devoured by monsters, John decides to return the arrow back to him, as if it returned like a boomerang without reaching its target. One strong swing and the arrow flies stronger and faster than from a crossbow. The arrow pierced Tim in the left chest, which he could not have expected. The arrow attacks like a cannonball and also drives him into the wall with its force. The dead crawl out of the clouds of dust and want to attack our hero again as quickly as possible and eat everyone in this village. Tim's hand is dripping with blood and he can do nothing but hang on the wall. Everyone remained silent, and Clint smirked at his opponent, embodying his dignity. Tim is nailed to the wall like a nail on a hanger. This is exactly what he deserves most, to bleed. He still doesn't understand what's going on here, where John gets such power from and what he should do. The situation is very bad for him, and he has no choice but to hang in there and hope for all the good. He clenched his teeth tightly, as if they would crumble into dust any minute. The boss screams like a real madman, whether he is trying to beg everyone to pity him. The beauty is worried about Tim's behavior, as if she is haunted by the life she lived for 6 months. The little sister runs up to her brother to express all her worries for them, for everyone who saved and protected all this time. John is full of shock, but hugs his little sister, and she talks about all the experiences that visited her head during a couple of hours of separation. John brought something for his beloved sister, and it is unclear what kind of surprise awaits her. She thought that John had brought her the meat of the dead and was amazed at how Tim, a cruel tyrant and not a ruler, raised children here. John was shocked by what his little sister said, how you could do this to a child and why.